Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Iblis Manifestations Podcast. This channel features lengthy off-limits conversations with various different artists and entrepreneurs, predominantly from the underground metal scene. We take deep dives into the topics of life, music, spirituality, and take insight from a variety of thought-provoking perspectives from personalities who you don't often hear from in a mainstream settings. I am your host, Cheyenne, and I was originally born and raised in Iran and currently reside in the UK. I am the frontman and founding member of the black death metal band Trivex, who have been active since 2009. The band originally started in the Islamic Republic of Iran, where such type of music is banned as well as a punishable offense. You can check the band's pages for any updates on tour dates as well as new music. I am also a personal trainer and an online fitness coach who specializes in people achieving the best versions of themselves physically and mentally. Having been someone who was once extremely out of shape and overweight, I find it to be my duty to be able to pass on the information and knowledge which I've gained to help others achieve the same transformation. The Iblis Manifestations Podcast also features a variety of solo episodes where I discuss personal experiences and anecdotes in a very candid fashion, covering everything from mental health, spirituality, philosophy, and even paranormal experiences. This is the Iblis Manifestations Podcast. To support it, be sure to subscribe to the channel and visit the link in the descriptions.
It's great talking to you, Cheyenne, really. And best of luck to your endeavors for this podcast. I think it's a great initiative.
You're my favorite person to talk to for interviews and stuff. So I love what you're espousing out here. I love the knowledge and the perspectives that you're curating through this, and I'm just so honored to be a part of it. Thank you.
As I told you, it was one of the most interesting interviews I've ever had, because we talk a lot more things than just music, and I really appreciated that.
I respect you deeply, and it's an honor to be here.
And friends, remember as always, better to die on your feet than to live on your knees. Enjoy the podcast. Okay, so I have the absolute honor of being joined by none other than the Warmaster, Mr. Josh Barnett. Hello, sir, and welcome to Iblis Manifestations. How the hell you doing?
Pretty good. It's probably going to be a fairly nice California morning.
It's fairly sunny here as well by UK standards, you know? It's usually pretty shit here. I know you've seen what it's like.
Yeah, I mean, the winter is basically gray and overcast for forever. But I mean, it's kind of like where I'm from in the Pacific Northwest. It's similar. Super rainy, super dark, super gray.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for us, even the summers tend to be like that sometimes, you know? So it's a bonus. All right, listen, man, I'm really honored to have you on the show. We met at Bloodstock Festival when you were here just less than a year ago, and we were having a killer fucking chat, and I was particularly impressed with your background knowledge on Zoroastrianism, you know, obviously being a Persian, you know, I'm quite passionate about that. And I was like, you know what, let me ask him. Let me see if he wants to come on the podcast and see if we can make this happen. So I'm very, very excited to have you on here. How's business and how's life and everything going for you at the moment?
Quite good. Although just when things are going well, that means that things are tremendously busy, which at times is a lot similar, I feel like, to the whole phrase, your eyes are bigger than your stomach. So you get this idea of what you can take on and what you're going to be able to manage as far as all these different projects and things. And then you get to it and you go, what the fuck was I thinking? And then you recognize that you do this every single time. So none of this should be new to you. So that's how I know things are going well, because I've basically got more than I can handle.
Well, that's you know what, I admire that, but that's also least surprising to hear, considering the amount of things I can see you got going on. Just with whether it's with Bloodsport or whether it's with the whiskey or whether it's all the different stuff that you're doing here and there, man. You're busy as fuck. Basically.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I just had 2 athletes compete in pro MMA fights last just this Saturday. One of them, he fought for the title of a local promotion here. It's pretty high level place. It's usually, I would say, it's about where the best guys in Southern California go to fight. And my guy Johnny Robles just won their bantamweight title, which was against a really tough opponent. And it's probably I could easily say it's arguably the biggest win of his career at this point. And it's great for him, moving him to 9-3. It's actually the second belt he's won now as a pro, which is great. And then on the undercard, I had a kid who's actually Bulgarian, Svetomir Todorov, and hot knife through butter through his opponent, which was great. Because it's one thing to be a good fighter. It's another thing for other people to know that you're a good fighter and want to make use of that, or to gather a fan base that wants to see you in the ring. So to do that, you got to be seen. So it was good for him to go out there for this promotion and to put on such a fantastic fight. Very one-sided.
Yeah. No, that's awesome to hear, man. I actually saw you posting about that, so congratulations both to yourself as well as your fighters. I know that obviously you've got the craziest instead of craziest, I should say most impressive history as a fighter yourself. But I also know that on top of that, even as a coach, I think that there's a fair bit of accolades that you've kind of gathered under your belt at this point.
I mean, I could say so, although I tend to really feel that the accolades of the athletes, not so much me, but I'm glad to be a part of it to help guide them to being able to perform in such a manner. And working on another fight for my other bantamweight, Victor Henry, in the UFC. Hopefully we'll have something to announce soon. And there's always kids coming and going, and I help a lot with the California Mixed Martial Arts gym team, where we also train at as well. And so there's always somebody that you're putting some time into, or is coming up asking a question, or is just, even by nature of them being a part of, let's say, any of the fighters that I work with, being a part of their journey as sparring partners and otherwise, everybody just builds into each other. So
absolutely, man. Very exciting. That's excellent to hear. And you were just in Australia this last week gone as well, because I saw that you were training with my friend Marcus down there from Diocletian.
He reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I see you're going to be in Sydney. I know you're a big fan of the band, and I'm a jiu-jitsu purple belt and I compete." And I'm like, "Oh, that's really badass. Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, I've got these seminars down closer to your direction. Just come on out. Be my guest. It'd be great." And one of the things that I love a lot about metal is so many different people can get involved into heavy metal music for any given reason, but then there's everything that they do outside of that. So you'll find people that are now actually competitive, either MMA, combat sport athletes, jiu-jitsu of some sort. Find folks that work in fitness like yourself. You can find people working in practically any kind of area of employment. And with that, you just never know where those connections are going to go. Not to mention, similar to how when the bands are traveling for either concerts, like concert tours, or even festivals and things like that, often that's like the time you actually get to hang out with any of your friends, because they either live somewhere else, abroad, or they're just so busy that they're always on the road. So being able to catch them at the right moment when they're home, even if you're in the same town, can be difficult, let alone, if they live in a different state or a different country. But what's cool is I can travel, and I'll have metal friends and new folks that I've never met, coming out to see me as I'm going and touring. So it works both ways.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. That's so true. It's kind of like that for us as well. I was having the same conversation with my fiance. I was like, if you really think about it, in our nearest vicinity, we don't actually have like any real friends. They're all either all across the UK or not even there, but like all across the world, you know. And it's kind of like, I think because of the niche and a very specific path that we kind of follow, I think that as metalheads, we kind of ought to recognize this. I'm glad you brought up the music because I kind of wanted to go off into that with you straight off the bat. So that's great. But we kind of forget how much of a minority we are just as people who like to listen to this particular strain of metal as well, you know? And yeah, there's very few of us. You know, you might go to a festival and you might look around and be like, oh, wow, there's thousands of people. Yeah, that's thousands of people. And a lot of those people you'll see at most other festivals as well. You know what I mean? So there's that kind of element.
Dedicated fan base. Very dedicated fan base. I think I read something a long time ago about metal being the most loyal listening group on Spotify, as in they're the ones that constantly and consistently listen and re-listen to stuff over and over again across all their genres, and have the most repeat clientele, so to speak. I think the other thing about it, and something I really like about what they kind of define as extreme metal, and that is when you get to that, it's like there's this barrier of entry, not just that it's not like it's asking you for credentials or something like that, or saying you got to be this high to ride this tall to ride this ride. It's saying we're not compromising our sound, so if it pushes you away, good. But if you can get into it, then you know you're more than welcome to be here. And with that, I think there's sort of an understood that other extreme metal fans, they're like, all right, yeah, we're in on the same shit. We're all in the same boat, so to speak, and to a degree, you've already gotten past that first barrier of entry, so you're all right. And there's not going to be a ton of us, as there is, if you really were to compare, say, you know, people that are into pop music versus people that are into extreme metal. The numbers are going to be massively diminished. But within that minority of sorts, you find people really open to be very welcoming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. You know, that's why, like, as I'm kind of getting older, even though I've always kind of worn the elitist outfit, I kind of, you know, I just think that the music is going to gatekeep itself, you know, like you either like it or you fucking don't. Speaking of which, what was the age that you actually got into metal? Like, what was your first discovery of it when you kind of started going down the rabbit hole?
Good question. I mean, it was very young. See, I had, when my parents would be at work, so there was a local mom who was friends with my parents, and we knew the family, so I would get babysat in the daytime while my parents were at work by the mother of this family that we were all friends with. And her son was older than me by 4 or 5 years, perhaps, maybe even maybe 5 to 6. And he was already getting into music. And during the 80s, you know, metal was something that was in that pop music, or considered along with other radio friendly types of things to put out there. Of course, I mean, there was limitations. You weren't going to get Slayer so much on the radio, or Sepultura, which would have been Sepultura being later, when they actually started to blow up in the US. But you would get Metallica, and you would get some Megadeth, and you would definitely get all the hair metal bands, and you could get your AC/DC and your new wave of British heavy metal stuff. So my first entry into it was just seeing, I think he had a t-shirt, it was for Iron Maiden Killers, and I just remember being like, what the hell is that? That is the coolest, raddest looking thing I've ever seen. I need to know what that is. And from Iron Maiden being my first like big band that I really got into, it was my favorite band. And you know, then there was Metallica and AC/DC and Megadeth and Priest and Rat and Wasp and Poison. It's, you name it, like just everything. You know, I just was into metal. And then it got to a point where it's like, well, I don't like hair metal anymore. And then I find Slayer and then I get into Death and Sepultura. I remember seeing a Bolt Thrower album cover in the CD racks and being like, whoa, Warhammer heavy metal? What the fuck? There's no way I couldn't own this. And from then, getting further into extreme metal, being up in Washington, there wasn't like a black metal scene. And it would have been new, really, by the time, let's say, those early 90s, like stuff like Immortal or Dark Throne or whatever. That would have been like, whoa, what's with this high-pitched screaming, the tremolo? I thought we were getting into down tuning, and now it was so different at first that it was really off-putting. But then in time, you start picking up on all this other stuff, and some things, and this is something I really liked about at least the way the older way of approaching music was, because if you spent your money on an album and you were taking a risk, you kind of had a want to not, that couldn't fail, right? So if you didn't like it at first, you would try to find out if it was just something that was so new to you, or because you weren't going to sit there and have wasted your $10 or whatever. Or if it was a CD, $18, you're like, because you had like a list or a array of choices, and you're like, but I can only afford to get whatever. Okay, well, maybe do they have it on tape? I'll buy 2 tapes instead of 1 CD or whatever. Right. You had to really be picky and choosy about how you spent your money on this kind of thing. So sitting down and trying to like really get into something was a necessity if you wanted to make your money last. And so I like that over time, like I didn't really even like I didn't really like Faith No More's Angel Dust at first. I really liked Epic, but I didn't like Angel Dust right off the bat. And then I just kept listening to it and listening to it and listening to it. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I get it. And now I fucking love it. I'm not fooling myself into something. So don't get me wrong. It's just me not expecting or wanting necessarily even these artists to try and play to the easiest route to keep and continue to have my attention, but instead doing what it is that they feel is best. And look, at the end of the day, if there's something that didn't drive with me, totally fine. I'm not out here to write off the band, but this is how you find new music. This is how you get into new genres. This is how you let yourself and whatever knowledge of music that you're acquiring over time, whatever sensitivity towards it, to show you new things. And with new things, man, comes new experiences.
Well, that's one thing that I think is extremely valuable and also authentic to the character of being a metalhead, is that it's almost like you have to earn the experience, I mean, for me, from my own background, we were in a situation where we weren't even supposed to fucking listen to it to begin with, So there was that too, that kind of like overarching thing. But, I think you pointed at something really important there, and it's that you would get an album and you would really have to give it time, because obviously either resources were limited. I think now it's just kind of fucked, because the newer generation, you'll play something on Spotify, you literally listen to 5 seconds of it and it's like, nah. And then you go to the next one, and then it's just kind of like you don't really get the chance to like let the artist's essence like kind of marinate in your ears and in your soul. You have to, it's something that you have to give time to, and that's how you get to expand and broaden your horizon. It's like I'm sure it was like that for probably a lot of people who maybe heard Deathspell Omega for the first time. It's like you listen to some of the riffs, especially the later stuff where it gets technical. It's like, well, what the hell's going on here, But you can't have the fast food approach to music that's that complex and has so many layers to it. You have to sit with it, and I think that's one thing that we probably lost with the more digital age. Whilst it has its perks, I think that it's that fast food kind of swipe left, kind of swipe right kind of an approach to music as well, which I think for metal, it's this genre is just capable of giving you so much more if you're willing to sit with it and give it the time that it deserves.
It does, and that's true. And while social media has expanded the way that people can find bands and bands can be seen, because of the nature of everything has to be in social media. So now you have to be able to do it in a way where you're now putting and pouring more resources into making your social media more memorable and to play with algorithms and all that. So now it forces you to add on a whole nother layer to just making music, and like having someone, even if you hired a publisher, like that, they got to do it. So you've got to play with this thing they say is free, but if you actually want to succeed at it, it's not free. And then with Spotify and the likes, it allows you to find so much more music than you ever could have. So the ability to challenge yourself is greater and easier than it's ever been, except the ease of which you can skip through things and pass by this and stay in a particular bubble, and or simply swipe left, swipe right. It's also there. And the thing is, whatever is easiest, we're likely to do more than anything that actually takes more effort. If you're just going to sit down, I don't want to and you just go ahead and cycle through all this stuff until you just find the thing that is relatable to you at the moment or most comfortable, then you don't really expand any of your horizons. And I love the fact that you can have stuff like the first, that Decibel Omega, when I got into them was it Paracletus, I think it's called.
Paracletus from 2010. Yeah. I think that's the best one, by the way.
And people were just ranting and raving about it. I had friends that were into this. I'm like, okay. And you start listening to it, you're like, oh, okay, what the fuck am I dealing with here? And you have to realize that sometimes the moment, the mood that you're in and living in at that time may not be the right thing that matches up to the music that you're trying to digest and to give it that. And I even think like Decibel Omega might really be more of the sort of thing you want to listen to from the first song to the last song, all the way through like a standard album listening, versus just picking and choosing songs. But maybe after a time, once you really have gotten used to that sound, then it's quite easier to find maybe just particular songs. But I think that you listen to an album like Paracletus and you just go, this thing was designed to take you on a particular journey with a certain aesthetic, and some of it is to unsettle you, some of it's meant to be more meditative. It's not for nothing. And the fact that you could struggle on initial listen to try to find how to be on that roller coaster and take it with you wherever it's going to go, yeah, that's fair enough. But then don't write it off. Give it a chance to show you what it is. And once you get below that surface, once you understand how the wheels are greased, it becomes a really fucking fun ride.
Absolutely. I think I don't know if this is a strong claim, but I actually think it makes you more intelligent. I think
possibly. I could believe that, because one, that's a point in my favor. So of course I want that to be true. But sure. I also think that it's because it's like the idea that they say, like, say, doing new things, learning new languages, finding new motor patterns makes you create new dendrites and connections in your brain. So why wouldn't different types of music create more stimulation potentially? I mean, I think there are studies that said that listening to classical music stimulates more neurons than other types of music. So when you have the levels of complexity that some of this metal music goes into, which is more akin to classical than closer to pop at times, I don't see why that wouldn't be the case.
Absolutely. Well, it's the process of neuroplasticity, which is essentially the process of learning something. And I think that what's particularly impressive and special about metal music, especially the more extreme forms of metal, and then on top of it, the more technical forms of it, such as Decibel Omega, is that when you first hear it, you might just hear noise. But then if you give it time, if you keep listening to it, if you keep training your mind and you keep revisiting it, then you'll hear the notes, then you'll hear the riffs, then you'll see where it goes. And then it can almost be quite a transcendental experience. Now, that intelligence that I'm talking about is kind of hard to measure, because it's like, well, does it make you better at speaking to people? Does it make you better at motor skills? How does it exactly make you better and more intelligent? I don't know, but I just know that it does, you know?
I think, to some degree, it could be like bands with more complex lyrical structures. If you're reading these things and learning what these lyrics mean or in the particular words, perhaps you hadn't heard before. I mean, you're growing your vocabulary.
That's true.
As for like, how would listening to more complex arrangements and more unique or different musical constructions, how would that make you smarter? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it's not so much that it directly makes you smarter, but maybe it allows for the potential for you to learn more things or create greater stimulus, what makes it more ready to learn in general. I think there was like studies, something about like people that listen to jazz or classical while they study retained more information or had better success with learning new information. I also think that, with metal, well, just music in general, especially if you're going to listen to higher quality music, classical, jazz, metal, something of that nature, that having a good stereo system is actually really important. And I don't necessarily mean like you have to have full on Macintosh, vintage tube amps and preamps and all that, but just something that can actually differentiate between all the different sounds and be able to play well enough all the different tones, and you can hear clear separation. And that can also be just like having decent earbuds or headphones, which with a decent amp and preamp, just so you're getting cleaner signals. And I think that makes a big difference in terms of your ability to really be taken over by the music as well, so that you can really hear what's going on and be able to try and, it's like once it gets to a point that you have the ability to hear all the little particularities of the music being made, it almost like it takes on a physical effect too, in terms of how you feel it in your body.
100%. Well, I think vinyl is probably the best way to do that, because, everyone always reports that when you listen to vinyl, you start to hear little bits and pieces that you actually don't on let's say, especially like a CD or like a compressed MP3 version of the songs. And I think, you're right. It does help enhance the experience if you've got access to even if not a hi-fi setting, at least a setting that's high quality. Unless, of course, you are listening to some early Burzum albums. But then again, it's 2025, so you're probably not allowed to be listening to Burzum.
Yeah, right.
There we go.
Well, but I mean, when you talk about like the super raw stuff, that even then being able to hear the rawness can make that experience that better. Being able to hear the background noise, the fact of, I don't know, the guy, stepped on a Lego, halfway through whatever the case may be, just so that you can hear what that was in the moment. And at the same time, I think when it comes to LPs, your vinyls versus your digital, vinyls have that natural physical tactile element to it. So what's imprinted on it is physically created there. Whereas with digital, obviously, it's not so much physical as it's digitally mastered onto this piece of medium. But if you have the right mastering and a good editor towards how that sound is put down, I mean, the highest bitrate stuff will actually give you the most complex, the deepest version of any sort of playing that you can get. And with the right speakers, it can keep it warm. But now you start talking about some pretty expensive stuff, which I would say, look, if it's within your realm and music is that important to you, then do what is possible to have the best stereo system that you can to deliver the cleanest, most vibrant version of the music that you're listening to. But at the end of the day, if getting that kind of system isn't really within your means, then just get the best headphones you can get and the best, cleanest like amp and preamp. and that will do you just fine. But yeah, I like going back to vinyls, especially nowadays. And I know even people are doing tapes again, because I love the differences. It's like shooting on various types of film versus shooting digital. You know, with these digital cameras these days, some of them will shoot photos so much deeper and more in depth. I mean, but then you also can run potentially the risk of like the 4K problem, which is upscaling stuff, and now it looks fake because it was shot to be on film with the lighting that they were using for film in that time. But it's great that there's so much is available to us these days, you know. But then, you know, the glut of choice.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And you know what? There's a question actually I want to ask you, and there's a follow-up to this. But have you ever actually considered working as an artist, let's say a singer or even a songwriter, especially within metal? Have you ever thought about doing something like that and actually contributing musically or lyrically?
I've thought about maybe trying my hand at writing some stuff, but otherwise, no, not really. And I've done like gang vocals for Hammerfall and a side project of a friend called I Am War and things of that nature. And it's kind of fun, but I don't really consider myself to be a musician at all. I didn't spend any of my character creation points on musical ability. My skill as a bard is 0. So I just appreciate it. You know, my dad used to play guitar, and I've been around music enough, and I've got a lot of friends that are into music, and I do my best to try and understand what goes into playing various instruments and how the music's created, because it just makes me feel like I have a better appreciation for the whole product. But yeah, I don't put the time into music. Maybe I do own a guitar, so the potential for me to screw around, and at the very least, I think just somebody finding a way to be musical, even if it's badly, is still a benefit than not. And it's another thing that people talk about is really great for mental development. Yeah,
for sure. Well, this is okay, so the lyrics thing, at least there's some potential there, you know, and I, as an artist, can at least tell you that. And here's why. So this is the follow-up I was getting to. So during a pre-fight interview, which you did during, so this was when you returned to the UFC in 2013, and you were obviously fighting Frank Mir, and this was UFC 164. There's a quote you have from that pre-fight interview, which goes, and I quote, "I will pull you apart like a piece of cooked pork until I am done." Now that's Cannibal Corpse right there. You could easily be writing death metal lyrics there.
Yeah, I'll admit, every now and again I come up with something, you know?
Yeah. But that's great, man. I was watching that the other day, just preparing, you know, like, or just like kind of like refreshing my memory on everything that I know of you. And I was just like, oh, you see, like that's a cool, you know, like death metal bands take quotes and then like drop it in songs. That's like a perfect sample right there.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of, after reading a bunch of Ernst Jünger, I did have some inspiration to maybe write some kind of lyrical, something lyrical around like Storm of Steel or War as an inner experience. I just think, you know, it's just very metal. So I thought, there could be something there.
For sure. What do you think it is about violence in general that feels so, should we say, necessary in life?
Well, I mean, it is really something that no matter how much you proxy it out to some external force like police or what have you, you can't, you're never actually able to abdicate violence entirely from your life. It's always at the bottom of every conversation. It is every negotiation, every argument, every conflict, you know. And I know people think immediately conflict means high emotions, screaming, anger. No, not necessarily. But I mean, it can simply start with hey, would you please not do X? And someone just says no. And then what is your recourse? Well, how important is it for them to stop doing X? And if it's important enough that you ask again, and then they say no again, and then it's like, well, I'm trying to explain to you how important it is for you to not to do this. And then their response could be simply, I don't care how important it is for you. I do nothing for no one. Or it could be, well, I didn't understand it that way. There's so many different like branches off of that tree that you could go from, but a bunch of them end up with coming to a certain potential where it's like, well, what are we going to do about it? And it's either one person's going to continue to escalate it, and then the other is going to escalate it until, one escalation has overtaken the other, and that's violence. At the end of the day, that's the furthest escalation you could go to. But it's there. That's where common courtesies come from. That's to reduce or eliminate violence as the mechanism of solving problems or arguments, and to potentially diminish getting into those areas of arguments or problems at all, because courtesy says, hey, these are what's accepted and these are what's not accepted. If you play around the not accepted, you're always playing around with the potential for violence to be enacted against you. If you play around in this other area, then you're basically saying, yeah, I'm trying to stay out of any issue of violence with me or other people because I am within the realm of courtesies. But some of that, all of that, I think, is predicated on any people having a sense of honor. And if you have no honor, you have no shame. Yeah. And if that's the case, it's a lot harder to try and keep people within the realm of common courtesy. It's also a lot harder to keep people from just being excessively contentious about things that it really isn't necessary to have such a hardline attitude. Now where this also comes from the fact that this loss of honor and shame is coupled with the idea of no one is allowed to enact violence without just cause via the law, which the law, it can't cover all scenarios. It cannot cover spirit and feeling, and it can't do much for the sake of honor, because honor isn't something that you can really write into law. It's just not a rational, mechanistic, material thing that you can structure, right? You can structure an action against an action, right? Like if you punch someone, it's okay, but if you stab them, it's not okay. I mean, you can delineate with the action, or you can say, like, if you attack someone without physical provocation, right? So someone didn't hit you or swing at you or come charging at you, then, you could say that is assault or whatever, however you want to define it. You can define the action, but the context around honor is so much more difficult. Unless you yourself live in a country that has honor or a system with honor, then you understand that which everybody actually inherently understands. Everybody understands that, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, so to speak. But if you allow people to denigrate you in public or and this doesn't mean you always have to respond with violence, but if your response is to just allow anyone to bring you down in the eyes of everyone else around you, everybody else will take on that same, well, this guy thinks it's okay to be diminished, and therefore we are not going to treat them with respect either. And you go, well, why would somebody think that way? And you go, now that's a different question. That's a complicated one, and it's tough to answer. But we all know that how people react to one another is heavily based on either respect or a healthy kind of fear. Not that you're just gonna like raise up and hit someone in the head with a baseball bat, although those that are uniquely dangerous or outlaw types within societies still garner a lot of respect, because nobody wants violence to just straight up be enacted on them, no matter how much it's like you could cry that's against the law and you're going to get arrested. At the moment, nothing is there to protect you other than yourself. And that's why, I have the firm belief that, like, I don't think about laws and rights and all that sort of thing. I think about that stuff is within the confines of what I can defend. And with that in mind, it also informs the way I try to go through the world and not create scenarios where anybody might be inclined to drive towards violence as a solution. And knowing violence and living with violence and making violence my occupation makes me just like, look, people, if it's not needed, don't fucking go there, because it doesn't stop and start when you want it to. It starts and stops when whoever's winning decides, you know, or even then there people might lose, and then that'd be too much for them to bear, and they come back and they bring a force multiplier of some sort, or who knows what. I mean, there's no given that it just ends out like, oh, he now realizes he was wrong because you beat them up. It's like, no, that doesn't necessarily change anything either. And you could be the person that's in the right and lose the physical confrontation. I forget, might have been John Stuart Mill that said, like, you know, the winner of a duel by no means has truly proven or verified their point to be more or less correct. You know, you won the duel, but that didn't necessarily mean that your argument was true, right? They're almost like it became two separate entities, one in a matter of personal honor and public perception versus the actual argument in and of itself. But it's just not a cheap thing, so don't play with it cheaply at all. And knowing that, I mean, it makes me maybe far more capable of using it, but also someone who just doesn't want to, because I can see where it goes, and I understand what it takes. And most people really don't want to have to deal with that, or they've never really thought it through or experienced it themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the thing you talk about with public perception brings to mind that famous Mike Tyson quote, you know, that a lot of people got used to running their mouths online without getting punched in the mouth, you know? And that's basically it, you know? And I think that it's very weird. Like, you kind of want to... on one hand, you want to take on this stoic approach of, well, you know, I don't care, you know, like, say whatever the fuck you want to say, but it does kind of affect your reputation and your thing, you know, and that's why I think social media it's one of the things that I think is kind of fucked, is giving people a skewed perception of reality and their own capabilities, you know. I think that in a perfect world, you want to be in a situation where you're absolutely capable of violence, but you choose not to go there because things can always come to a respectful and mutual resolve. Now, there's kind of like, going back to what we were talking about earlier, because I brought up Zoroastrianism, something that, I mean, even though it's something that I knew about growing up, I've kind of been delving into this more and more recently. And I actually think this is a particular type of religion. I don't know how much you actually know about it, but it's I think it's something that goes kind of perfectly hand in hand with this. So one idea that Zoroastrianism kind of reinforces is that individuals have free will, and by way of free will, people get to... they're responsible for their own choices of good and evil. Okay, so it's a religion of dualism, okay? And by dualism, it's more of a vertical dualism, meaning that, so say, for example, in the case of Christianity, you've got the body and then you have the spirit. In the case of Zoroastrianism, you've got all of these things at one, and then they split into two different camps, which is the good, which is Ahura Mazda, and the bad, which is Angra Mainyu. And what's very cool about it is that... if you get into the later sort of sect of Zoroastrianism, there's one called Zurvanism. Zurvan is the deity of time. And what Zurvanism says is that basically both good and evil are primordial deities and beings, and they will be in war with each other for eternity. Okay, so there's almost that ongoing conflict is a universal law and something that is within nature. Okay, I think that's extremely fascinating, you know, and I know someone like yourself who's been around and has had the type of lifestyle and career that you've had. You probably have a fantastic perspective of this because, you know, just being involved with something that is so inherently rooted in just who we are as human beings, as animals on this planet, or even as spiritual beings, is that state of war or violence always has kind of been there. I think it's just kind of how you deal with it. So, for example, just, I know it's a long tangent here, but for example, one of the things that I kind of came to the conclusion of is that, so in the context of Zoroastrianism, once again, you've got the good and evil. To me, the evil, which is both the body, mind, and the spirit, that can be just weakness. Okay, so to me, a man who is weak, who is either fat or just out of shape or incapable of defending himself, to me, that's kind of a manifestation of the real evil, because it shows that regardless of what your intentions are, what your words are, you're always at the mercy of the rest of the world. So even the good deeds that you have in mind, they're not potent enough to mean anything. Okay, and I'm saying this in reflection of my own past self when I used to be super overweight. You've met me in real life. I'm not the tallest guy in the world. You know, like I'm 5'7", 5'8". And I used to be, I used to be like 260 pounds just from being fucking totally obese and overweight, you know? And to me, that's a manifestation of the real evil. It's that weakness, you know?
Well,
and I seek every day to annihilate it.
I hear you and I agree with you. And I have a scale of strength and weakness in the way how I view and operate in the world, but it's a very simplistic mechanism, and that is strength is when you choose, despite the difficulty, the responsibilities, any of the things that make the task or the choice hard or harder to do than another choice. And you choose it anyways because you believe that you are doing the right thing, that you are doing something that is either building up things of good value and capability within yourself or in others, or just, you know, something simply as picking up after yourself and not trashing or being a part of having things that destroy the aesthetics and the beauty of the place that you are at. Just by having a simple respect around things, it takes more effort to make sure to leave a place better than when you got there than it does to treat it as if you don't care and it'll be somebody else's problem and perhaps you'll never be there again. So what do I,
Absolutely.
And the weakness part of it is every time you choose to do the easier thing or to do something that you know is less than what was necessary, to engage in bad behavior, bad habits, to do things because it's simpler and more immediately gratifying to do so. That to me is choosing weakness. And it's always a choice. You can choose to be strong. You can choose to be weak. You could be afflicted with like a physically destructive type of illness that is literally killing you. And yet you could still choose in the ways that it was capable of you to choose so, to do things that will be harder, will be more difficult for you, which could be everything because of under a certain circumstance, right? But you still choose to, and that can be like, well, physically you can do nothing, but what your words mean can be everything, where you could choose to take one position because it's easiest and makes most people happier because they're unchallenged by you choosing that way. Or you could say what you believe to be right, or even just individuate yourself and saying, yeah, that's all fine, but this is where I stand, and you don't have to see it as contention specific against you. But if you take it that way, I'm okay with that too, because you're just showing me your own position. You're not really, it's not about the thing I've said or about the thing you believe. It's about your inability to meet me as a person in this moment in the same level of respect and the same level of consideration that you want for yourself. And a simple way of thinking about that is I remember there was a guy named Michael Lerner who was a stand-up comedian. And I met him on Kill Tony. And funny enough, like, he was a huge fan of mine, of all things. I just never know who was a fight fan or who would have watched it. And the guy had a wasting disease. It was literally killing him. Minute by minute, hour by hour. And he had to be brought on stage in a wheelchair kind of contraption. He was saying at the moment, for him to be able to speak, he kind of has to sing his words to get them out. And yet the guy was doing stand-up comedy, something that I've never had the guts to do.
I know the gentleman which you're talking about, by the way. I've watched the show and I know exactly who you're talking about. I had a lot of admiration for him with his condition coming on and barely being able to even speak towards the end, but still doing stand-up. That was very admirable.
To me, that's a man choosing strength. Choosing to enact his will to power for what he has capable within him still, and get on that stage and without. I mean, I won't say that it was without fear. Yeah, I'm sure he, even in his condition, I'm sure he still could feel fear and nervousness. But wow, what strength! What strength of movement and action and will within himself to just do that. And people can look on it very tritely and say, well, what's that matter? He's just getting on stage to tell jokes. Like, who cares? But that's really missing the forest for the trees. So, I see stuff like that, and it reminds me that there's a lot of ways in which we could be forced to make choices of strength or weakness. Or it's like the person that becomes fat to a certain point, and then because it's so difficult to lose the weight, and it's not something that gives you rewards that are apparent every day, that
it's not instantaneous.
They fall further and further into the path of weakness and just like, oh, well, it's fucked anyway, so who cares? And, to just keep doing that. And not even realizing that you're actually really physically damaging yourself and what you could do. Not everybody's going to be super lean, but it's about the way you approach trying to just be healthy in general. And it's just, despite all the fucking absolute bullshit propaganda around just being overweight that has been peddled out over the last 10 years, just insane fucking bullshit. But it literally affects your hormones negatively. It can affect all your ability to sleep well, create sleep apnea, obviously give people type 2 diabetes, and it's just not healthy.
Let's not forget depression and anxiety, man. That's, I think, one of the main things that it will fuck you with. And I can say this because I speak from experience. And I remember being a fucking fat fuck, just sitting in a bedroom, not even bothering to go for a walk. Because, and if someone would say to me, oh, Shine, didn't you say you were going to go for a walk today? I'd be like, oh, no, I am too depressed. Fuck off, Like, it's just this self-fucking perpetuating cycle of negativity and self-destruction, which, like you said, at the time, you might not even realize it, but... you have to work, you have to do things, and the real good things in life are not in the format of instant gratification. You have to work for them, you have to give it time, and you have to keep carving away at the rock, even if you don't see any results. It might even take you a very long time before you see any results, but the fact of the matter is you have to be able to be disciplined enough to stick to it, regardless of how shitty it might feel in the moment, and I have basically had to learn that from scratch, and actually, what? I love the fact that you made the example of Michael Lehrer, I believe was his name. I think that's such a great example because, yes, the guy is like literally slowly dying and decaying, yet he's going on stage, and he was actually very funny, like his delivery and everything was hilarious, and he actually kind of used his illness in a very positive way that just made him funnier, actually.
Yeah.
And I guess on a show like Kill Tony, that's the place you will absolutely get away with something like that.
You can, and you also have to be quite strong yourself to get on that stage to know that Tony is going to be there. He's the ultimate shredder. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. A great roaster, of course. But the thing that, just going back into it as well, is that at the end of the day, when you're trying to forge an iron, you don't just sit down, hold a piece of steel, and then just like cry empathetically until it gets into shape. No, you have to grab a hammer and beat the fuck out of it, okay? And put it under heat. That's how it works. And sometimes you just have to do that to yourself to really go anywhere as well.
Yeah, you'll make mistakes. You'll be wrong sometimes. You just got to keep going. Yeah. And the thing is, once you get overweight to a certain degree, you need to realize that the reason why you don't see the results as quickly as you think is because you haven't really got the system going yet. It's already working in a bad way, not and suffering to try and do what it can. You stressed it massively. So once you finally get it going, you're not going to probably see any results till maybe a month. Sadly, 100%. Sometimes 2 months in, because your hormones aren't set yet, your patterns aren't set yet. You haven't been, getting the recovery process of actually breaking things down going. You haven't. All this needs to get going, which you gotta give it time to reset itself, which is also so important. Why, if it's possible, to not let it get so far too bad in the first place, and especially don't let young kids get really fat and out of shape, because then it sets a pattern in their body that makes it really hard for them to beat later on in life. And, kids are about the healthiest thing you can usually come across, right? They can fall out of everything and get broken and be fixed in like a week. I mean, your bodies are just constant revivification machines, growing and growing and getting bigger. And to stunt that by adding excess body fat and or just like bad foods, bad, eating habits and training habits, it's just really destructive to kids. And that has a long-lasting impact.
That's honestly, man, I find that so fucking upsetting and just angering to see that when I see kids. To me, it's like fucking child abuse. If your kid's obese, you fucked them up, and that's, and it's kind of like you said, which is very true actually, is that becomes just physically alone. Let's forget about the habits and the shit that you've now instilled in them, and the bad habits that get passed down from parents, but just physically it becomes a lot harder for them to lose that weight as they get older. But just going back into it, what you're saying, I have this quite commonly with a lot of my clients who get onto the program and they want to lose weight. And usually when I give them a nutrition plan, one very common thing that I hear back from them is that, this actually feels like too much food to eat compared to what I'm used to, even though they're already in a deficit. And part of it is that people have such bad habits that they've already trashed their metabolism and hormones, as you put it. So now then going on to this other thing, they have to actually fix their thing. And people, one thing I always say to not just clients, but everyone, is that if you're going to take shortcuts, the only place that shortcuts are going to take you is back to exactly where you started at the end of the day. And, so everyone wants to just, instead of actually studying and doing it right, they want to starve themselves or do intermittent fasting. And I'm not against fasting at all. I think it's amazing for you, but you have to do it right. You have to eat the right thing before you start it. You have to eat the right thing when you break it. And then an hour later, you have to be on the right supplements, all these things. But people just want to take shortcuts. So they end up trashing their fucking metabolism and hormones. And then at the end of the day, it's just kind of like, they're kind of left there like, well, why am I not seeing any more results here? And it's like, well, you just need the proper guidance. What's the quality
of the food you're eating too? What type of foods and what quality of foods you're eating? And, and that's where it's like, okay, I hate to break it to some of you out there, but animal products are the best forms of nutrition for us to have, in addition to, fruits and vegetables and things of that nature, especially when grown and without the right kind, without the certain pesticides and preservatives. But we thrive off of animal proteins and fats and the amino profiles from them. I mean, it makes us what we are. It really fuels us and develops growth and muscles and lubricity in joints and healthy skin. I mean, it's just, we're predators. That's the way we're designed, the way our eyes work, the way our eyes are set, the way that we move and how we track things. When we're made to hunt, but we're able to get by with others, with things like, going to grains and vegetables and these natures. They allow us to create storage, and we get into agriculture and animal husbandry, which is great. Having cattle and farms, we can expand our populations, but honestly, food from animal material is our highest stock of foods we can get, and everything else falls far underneath that. Which isn't to say necessarily eating carnivore. That's, again, you go in extreme, right? Now, some people, they might need something that's which under another term in dieting is nutrition is elimination diets. And part of that is to find out, well, what's the thing that's actually causing you problems? And quite often it's usually something around grains or particular vegetables or whatever, but you wouldn't know that unless you did an elimination diet and then slowly introduce things back in and see how things change or don't change. And then even then, if you do find a change, it's like, well, why? Is it just the thing itself, or is it the way the thing has been processed and how I'm eating it? Or is it the way the thing was grown? Is it the way, like, I guess I was reading something about how this guy he's got gluten issues and celiac issues, but then he was using flours and or eating in different places around the world and saying, does this affect him? Does that affect him? And a lot of people were chiming in like, well, like the flour in Italy, they don't allow this, and this. So if you eat things baked with flour from this region under their constraints about what you can use in it and how you can produce the flour, you might actually find that you don't have those issues. And I've had people, when I've taken them with me to Japan, eat anything they fucking felt like and just felt amazing and had no adverse effects that they would normally have in the States.
Well, this is very, very interesting and a completely relevant topic right now. I'm intrigued to see what will happen in the US with RFK being in the position that he is. But I can attest to that, like, for example, I think the glyphosate is kind of where a lot of the fuckery might be coming from. That's obviously on top of the rapeseed oils and the soybean and sunflower, all of that stuff. But I experienced
the stuff that was
thing.
Made for industrial oil production and to begin with, not for edible consumption.
Literally. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it was, so last August, I think it was literally like a week or two after I met you. My band, Trivex, we were playing Frantic Fest in Italy, which is in Francavilla al Mar, right next to Pescara. And it was a killer lineup, actually. We were playing with Marduk, Terrorizer, and Darvaza, and a bunch of other great bands. And then we were there, and it was actually my first time visiting Italy. And we ate as much fucking food as we could, all right? So like all the calories and the macros and the tracking went straight out of the fucking window, Yeah. Absolutely. And the whole time I felt absolutely great. And you look around and Italy is a very carb heavy fucking, their food is very carb heavy when it comes to their diet and everything. And you look around, you hardly see many fat people or people who are overweight or out of shape. And you don't necessarily see like fucking hulks and bodybuilders walking around either, but you don't see people the same way that you do, say, either in the UK or especially in the US, so I think that quality of the food and where it comes from, I think in Canada, it was like 95% of pregnant women, they found traces of glyphosate in their gut microbiome because it basically replicates itself. It is really fucked up, it's a serious problem.
It is fucked up. And I mean, think about the Italian suit. Think about the concept of the Italian suit. What does that look like? It's a slimmer fit suit. How are you going to have suits like that if everybody was fat? Obviously, for sure. The thing is that from around at least the way that you would have thought of Italians, especially from the 50s to, and I mean like Romans, because obviously there's a difference between Northern Italians and Southern Italians. But you would think of like the Romani, the Romans, not Romani, the Romans, the Milan, the people from Tuscany or further up that area, the slim Modena kind of suit structure. Well, yeah, it's based on the idea everybody was much slimmer than other places, and it was just a way of dressing. But you can't dress that way if you're overweight. It just wouldn't work all that well. So, but by eating just healthier foods and by having different food habits, and I think it also helps when you have more seasonal elements to food, so you're not counting on certain preservatives or certain types of inorganic fertilizers and methods to grow or to have food constantly year round that you wouldn't normally. And that removing that kind of the effects of foods like that out of your diet, even though it might suck that you wanted an avocado in winter or something maybe, but
Sure.
It's just way healthier to do things where you're keeping things more closely aligned with nature than otherwise. And I understand with the amount of people that are in the world these days, you can't do it all on just old school farming per se, but
Sure.
the less of it that we can do that isn't essentially full of just poisons and toxic stuff and stuff that maybe won't affect you immediately or greatly because we're incredible filter machines, but in time it will, or with the introduction of one other element might make it that much worse. You just never know. And just because we can get by with stuff doesn't mean we should be putting it in our bodies anyways. It's just, we don't, some of these things, we don't know what the long-term effects are going to be, and we just take it for granted.
Well, absolutely. We eat. I have one thing that there's a lot of like debate on more recently is the idea of sweeteners. Some people are saying, oh yeah, it's this and that, it causes cancer. Some other people are saying, no, it's absolutely fine, no calories, have as much as you want. I just think that nature always has consequences for things. Okay, so everything is almost like an exchange of value, and whenever you take shortcuts, there's always a trade-off. And to me personally, again, as a coach, I'm not supposed to say to my clients to have something that's got more calories or whatever, depending on what they're trying to do. I'm not supposed to advise them on sweeteners. But then for myself, I think like, well, you're literally having chemicals that are hacking your brain into thinking that this is something that it isn't. Mm-hmm. So already it's like, okay, there's something wrong there. Like, well, why do we need to do that?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And a lot of us can easily be found guilty of having those Coke Zeros and things like that to
myself included, just for the record,
the way I've tried to do it is I won't bring any of it home. Like I will not buy it and have it at the house. I won't do anything like that. If I'm out, I might have it at, like, if I sit down to eat somewhere, or I might order it then, but then even if I'm better about it, I won't even order it. You know what I mean? And I'll avoid it. But yeah, that's stuff like that. But again, if you're not overloading your system with all kinds of other, shitty chemicals, like maybe your body can deal with, this with like sugar alcohol or something that they've added instead of like a straight sugar, and therefore it's like, we don't love it, we can filter it, just like we can drink and filter alcohol, and we can take ibuprofen and NSAIDs to a degree, and our liver's like, we don't love it, but we'll be all right. You drink plenty of water, you eat healthily enough. But again, you start stacking all these different effects. I'm doing grip work the whole time while I'm sitting here talking to you on the
cool. Yeah. Right on.
But you start stacking it all together, or there's also this consideration like, oh, actually, it's just you. I'm sorry, you drew the card. This really messes you up, and it's bad for you specifically. Like your body just can't handle it. So sorry,
Yeah, for sure. You can do like little tests and stuff. You can send your hair, and I mean, ideally somewhere from your head and not pubic hair, but they can actually they can.
Well, some of us, depending, I feel for you, maybe a beard hair and something.
Yeah, that's it. But you can actually get that checked. Like, jokes aside, you can actually see what kind of foods you're allergic to, and like you can be allergic to like the most random fucking things. Like garlic can give you like severe inflammation, and it'll be one thing for one person, and it'll be totally different to another person as well. Again, our DNA and genes are very complicated things. Josh, I kind of want to round this a little bit, but there's a very important question that, again, just kind of reeling it back to the philosophy of training and working out and things like that, I just kind of want to, because one thing that I try and do is I want there to be parts of the conversation that people can listen to and they can sort of grab something from, and then they can kind of maybe hold on to that for a while, and then maybe it will benefit them in their own sort of journey, if you will. One thing that I want to kind of ask you about is, obviously, I know that as someone who, when you were younger, essentially, I know that obviously when you're a kid, especially, like if you're just like I was, an angry kid from Iran, I just wanted to fucking like beat everyone up and scream at everything, and I was just angry at literally like everything that existed. I know that you obviously, when you were younger as well, you had similar issues. But then I know that you found a lot of solace in being an athlete, essentially, and in sports and physical activities. So, with that kind of outline there, my question to you is: what would be your advice to particularly young men today, growing up in the world?
One, you're made for adventure. You're made for for going out in the world and finding out who you are by failing more times than succeeding, by making a fool of yourself, by choosing right and choosing wrong. But as long as you can own your decisions and try to have a better understanding of where you're trying to go, that doesn't mean like I'm trying to be a hedge fund manager, I'm trying to be a personal trainer, I'm trying to be, the WWE, champion of the world, whatever. Instead, think of it like I'm trying to get to a place where I feel physically this way. I'm trying to get to a place where I feel confident at least at where I'm at now, enough to move forward to try and do other things later. Don't try to even necessarily zero in on something so specific as an occupation or something like that, but like I'm trying to be a person whose word is considered bond. That would be a hard enough thing in the world for most people. I'm trying to be the kind of person that has respect even from people who don't like me. How do you, that's a really difficult one to have, because most people, as soon as they dislike you, they just emotionally, they've come just diarrhea the whole thing up, instead of even being able to sit back and be like, I absolutely can't stand you, but I have respect for who you are and your capabilities. And with that, it also tempers the way I'm going to approach this, but let you know, we are not friends and we are absolutely enemies for this reason. But I'm not just a petty, over the top, like emotional idiot about the whole thing. To develop certain things in that nature, I think keeps it so that you're not getting hung up on like, well, I haven't achieved being the UFC champion or something yet. It's like, well, if it's possible, the only way it's going to get there is by you continually getting further along your growth as a fighter. That just can't be helped. And if today you only grew 0.1% and tomorrow you grow 10%, you're still growing in the same direction, which is good. And your potential is limited by a few things, but mostly of all, it's limited by your how much input you give it and how much you are even aware of whether or not you're going forward or going backwards.
Input is such an important word there. Input, very important.
Yeah. But with that, I would say the easiest solution that I have is to just get into sports of some sort, because it's a way that you can directly attack challenges and deal with things and exert your will upon a moment and an opponent or an opposing team, a problem, a dilemma between, strategies. I mean, that just allows that to be expressed out of yourself in a place that is totally acceptable to do so. And it could be something as raw, and I would say peak of athleticism, like mixed martial arts. It could be something stepped down from that, which I would say even tennis, because tennis is one-on-one. Like the way I hit the ball, the strokes I take, the way I serve, this directly affects your ability to return. And so we're in combat with each other to win this game. And then you could go to things like American football or rugby, where there is full contact, but you're in a team now. It's like two opposing armies having battle after battle, seeing who wins a war kind of thing. and you learn to work with other people, the strategy of it all, the fact that you have leadership that's trying to guide you, but yet you still have to be able to make your own actions and on the call, out there on the moment. I mean, these things are all, and this isn't to say like just being a jock is the solution to things in the world, but if you look back, I mean, so many people that we think of as important leaders in the world or important figures, I mean, they spent time being physical as well as being mentally engaged. And, I mean, I'm not saying that everyone's going to become like the greatest sportsman in the world, but I just think that, and even if you're not going to go ahead and compete in sports, to try weightlifting, bodybuilding, powerlifting, something, Olympic lifting, where the challenges can't be overcome just because you want to try harder necessarily, or because like the weight doesn't give a shit about you. You either can move it or you can't. And you can work on your technique, you can work on your strength, you can work on these things, but you're going to start hitting limits. And then you start thinking like, well, this guy can lift X and I can lift Y and his is greater. But maybe just for you, maybe you'll never be stronger than that person. But if you can be stronger than you were the day before, I mean, that's still an improvement. And perhaps now you can start looking at your own journey more under more focus and more scrutiny, and not so much about somebody else's.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So essentially, dare to fail. Josh Barnett, wise words, brother. Thank you so fucking much for joining me on Iblis Manifestations. I'll love to carry this on for another 10 hours with you, but I want to respect your time, man.
We'll just have to do this again is all.
We absolutely will, definitely. Anything you got going on that you kind of want to plug to the listeners and stuff for people to keep an eye out for? I know there's probably quite a few.
Yeah, well, always keep an eye out for Warmaster edition whiskeys when they're out there. That's our single barrel stuff. And there's also the round one blend that I've done. Keep an eye out for Warbringer whiskey. It's a mesquite smoked bourbon finished in sherry cask. It's amazing stuff. I'm very proud of it. I have Josh Barnett's Bloodsport 13 coming up during WrestleMania week. It's a professional wrestling show, but not one like you're going to find anyplace else. And it is the hardest hitting event in all of professional wrestling for a good reason. We've got that show coming up April 17th, which is a Thursday, during WrestleMania week in Las Vegas.
I love the one you did with John Moxley, and I especially the whole style of it, just the whole no ropes thing, and the way it is. It's almost like if I wanted to re-envision pro wrestling, that's actually how I would do it. So total support.
Well, thank you. That was probably Bloodsport Bushido from Japan, which you can also watch on Triller TV. You can also watch this next Bloodsport 13 on Triller. I think it's on Triller Plus, but there's lots of like free previews and things like that. And I think that's what I got going on at the moment. Yeah, but we'll hear more about different things soon.
Amazing, man. Well, listen, brother, I appreciate the fuck out of your time. Hope to bump into you again soon. Best of luck with everything, and especially the upcoming Bloodsports. Congratulations on your athletes winning. Again, like I said, you've got a lot going on, man. And keep on being you and kicking ass. All right.
That's all I know how to do.
Excellent. Love it. And to everyone else listening to the podcast so far, hope you guys enjoyed this one. Support the fuck out of the one and only Warmaster. And we'll see you on the next episode of Iblis Manifestations. Bye-bye.